coming in, just, make room. Welcome, everyone. My name is Brant Himes. I'm the discipleship pastor here at Westside. I also teach theology for Los Angeles Pacific University. So thank you for joining us. Lots of interest in C.S. Lewis. So as you saw maybe from my kind of back and forth emails, we added an 11 o'clock class and then we added an 8:15 class. And so we've had lots of great interest in what we're doing today. So as we get started, I'm just curious why you guys are here. What's so great about C.S. Lewis? Or maybe you like me, I don't know. But I just would love to hear what drew you into the class.
You have me at Lewis.
Lewis. Yeah, absolutely.
You just hear him referenced so often.
Yeah.
I think that is,
Yeah, he's one of these people you just hear quoted often. Yeah, that's good. What else?
You said imagination. I thought the Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah, imagination. What else?
Read a little bit of several of his books, but especially the Screwtape Letters.
Okay.
And he's just a phenomenal thinker.
Yeah.
So it was just so fun to have this offered here because we don't get this kind of thing
Sure.
often. And,
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
I read The Great Divorce, Until We Have Faces. In
Okay.
the past, I would have to have a review, but the idea of, can salvation be attained after death is in some of his writing,
Right.
that there is a second chance.
Yeah.
And I'm just, and also that myths have an element of truth somewhere,
Yeah.
perhaps.
That's good. Yeah, so encounters in the past with Lewis, absolutely. Yeah.
I have adult children. They're very smart.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
love his background, that coming from an atheist viewpoint in the academia and
Yeah.
how he came to
Yeah.
Christ. So definitely.
Yeah, he has a really relatable story.
He is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I tried to read the reading.
Okay.
And I got maybe 3/4 of the way through it.
Sure.
And I felt like I was in a boat and I was at sea and I was completely surrounded by the fog. And then once in a while I'd see a little piercing light come in. And it would hit me, and then I would go, and then it would disappear.
Right.
So I said, well, I need to go and have you explain this.
What is going on? Yeah, that's good. I gave you obscure writing so you would have to come and ask questions.
It worked.
Anybody else?
We enjoyed Bonhoeffer.
Enjoyed Bonhoeffer, yeah. Yeah, last year I did a course on
Yes.
Dietrich Bonhoeffer. So, and I just have to admit, I know Bonhoeffer better than C.S. Lewis, so that's okay. I'll try not to reference Bonhoeffer in this class. Anthony?
Here for you.
You here for me? Thank you, Shucks. Cool. Well, I'm glad you guys are here today. Just for your reference, we've got I got a shared folder with all of our readings, the presentations, and some other resources. So you want to kind of keep this link handy. You can either use the QR code or go to the tinyurl.com/westsideclass. And I'm going to be posting our readings in there. The readings each week are optional. If you don't do them, still please come. This isn't like school. You don't have to do homework. But if you want to do homework, you're welcome to. I'll be posting the readings each week, probably by Thursday. I posted the week 2 readings already in here, so you're welcome to grab those. The presentations will be posted in there along with some other resources that I have for us. Does anyone know who this is, this weird little statue? Yeah.
Mr. Tumnus.
This is Mr. Tumnus from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So if you haven't read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, you jump in. Next week, I think we got some Chronicles of Narnia in our readings. So it's funny, when I sent out the first week 1 readings, I did all this scanning. Oh yeah, this is good, this is good. And I put it all together, and I was like, wow, this is a lot. So sorry. I think the next weeks aren't quite as intense. But I wanted to give you particularly some background information from Surprised by Joy. That was kind of the bulk of the reading. Yeah, so these sculptures, Mr. Tumnus, there's a C.S. Lewis Square in Belfast, Ireland, which is where Lewis is from. And there's all these sculptures kind of around the square. And so I'll try and share some various various sculptures as we get in there a little bit. I got, so we're live streaming. This is the other thing. We have a new live stream website for these classes. It's just class.westsidechurch.org. And so if you miss a class, sometimes people have gotten a few emails, oh, if I miss the class, is that okay? Can I still come? Please still come. If you miss it, you can watch the recording. If you don't watch the recording, still come. Like, just be here when you can. If you can't, that's okay. There's resources if you want to catch up. If you don't catch up, that's fine. I'm not gonna. There's no tests or anything like that. But if you do happen to miss, we're recording and we're live streaming. So if you have also people that you want to share this with, you can. Great. Okay. Easy question as we get started here. What is Christian imagination? So we talked about this class, C.S. Lewis, and then we threw on Christian imagination. So what do we mean? It's kind of, C.S. Lewis, we got this historical figure, but now we put Christian imagination on that with us. What do we mean when we talk about Christian imagination? Well, what does that bring to mind? If you had to define it, what would you say? Yeah.
Well, I would think what it is with your understanding and knowledge of God, the Christian God,
Okay.
that you allow your imagination to kind of run free in that sphere, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's
Good. Okay. Yeah, what else? What else comes to mind? Yeah.
Maybe thinking beyond what we've been taught
Okay.
about Christianity, and
Yeah.
if we put it in a box, this allows us to look outside.
Yeah, an openness to learning more deeper things. Yeah.
I think also from like a youth viewpoint, what is a child's imagination
Yeah.
of Christianity when they're going to their youth groups and
Sure.
their youth, starting, because my children started going to youth groups at a very early age. So
Yeah.
it's like, what do they also think in their minds of what they're being taught
Yeah.
in these classes, right? So
Yeah.
and I'm taking this viewpoint and coming to this is because my son is a youth pastor
Okay.
for middle school children, and just kind of like, what more so not at the middle school age, but at the younger age.
Sure. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. One more. Yeah.
I was just thinking about the theme of good and evil and what can and will triumph
Okay.
runs through perhaps the
Yeah, so this idea, our imagination can help us to, all these great epic tales are these battles between good and evil, right? And so sometimes imagination helps us to grasp and to kind of wrestle with that story and what that looks like. That's good. So here's a definition, kind of a theological definition for you from a Catholic scholar. He says, the Christian imagination is concerned precisely with the tension, the polarity, which arises between visible, sensuous reality, the stuff we touch and see and feel, and the hidden things which have been revealed to us, between the phenomena of time and the substance of things hoped for. So if I were going to summarize that quote, I would say, Christian imagination helps us to perceive something of the mysterious truth of God. So what I'm interested in this class, what I hope we get to explore together, what we will explore together, is, I would say, this invitation into how our imagination can help us enter in and understand more of the mystery of God and how God has revealed himself to us. I remember when I was in college and I was one of the, I would say, first kind of callings or inklings I had to study theology more. I was sitting in this class and I had this sense of, wow, God is really mysterious. And so I could study him the rest of my life and still have stuff to learn. And to me, that was an exciting invitation because it meant that kind of the world was open for me, not only to keep learning and growing, but to encounter God in new ways and to open up my mind and my perspective. And imagination and wonder, and we'll talk about joy and longing and desire. These things invite us into experiencing God in deeper ways and in maybe new ways, and in being open to really seeing the reality of God beyond kind of the tangible things that we have in front of us every day. So it's really an invitation to perceive and to encounter more of who God is and what God can do in our lives. So the next 4 weeks, we got a few topics we're going to cover. This week we're going to look at the Christian imagination, wonder, and joy as an invitation to faith. Next week we're going to look at story as theology, this idea of imagination in the gospel. In week 3 we're going to look at symbol, sacrament, and seeing the world enchanted again. And then the last week we'll look at imagination and discipleship, formation, forgiveness, and hope. So it's a brief roadmap for the next few weeks. Goals, 3 goals that I have for the next few weeks together. First, we're going to take a tour of Lewis's theological and imaginative writings. So you'll see in the readings, I think I try and pull from about 3 different readings each week. So I want to introduce you to kind of this broad scope of some of Lewis's theology, some of his fantasy, put those things together. Each week we'll have kind of a combination of both and put those in conversation together. But they're just going to be brief introductions. I hope that it's an invitation for you to, maybe you'll find something that you want to pick up and spend some more time with as you go. But you'll have a little bit of a foundation to kind of keep journeying with Lewis during and after the class. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to practice theological reflection by exploring key themes. Basically, I'm going to invite you into conversations, and the fancy word for that is theological reflection. So we're going to talk about theology and who God is and what God's doing and how theology and imagination can help us understand more of who God is. And then I want to invite you to integrate the spiritual practice of wonder into our rhythm of discipleship. So each week I'm going to introduce a spiritual practice that you're invited to explore a little bit, and that'll be connected to kind of imagination and wonder. And just hopefully you'll come away with a couple new resources or tools that you can use in your own spiritual walk. All right, and then a couple of key questions that I want us to sit with as we go through. How does activating my imagination help me to experience something of the wonder, mystery, and truth of God? So what is this connection that we have to imagination and how God has revealed himself? And then how does engaging my imagination, how can that actually deepen my discipleship and invite me into growing closer to who Jesus is? All right. So here's a brief kind of overview of Lewis's life, just to give you a little bit of context. He was born June 6, 1895. He died November 22nd, 1963. He was born in Belfast, Ireland. When he was a child, he ends up kind of abandoning his childhood faith while he's away at prep school. He then, later, as he gets older, he discovers George MacDonald's Fantastes, which he says baptized my imagination. And we're going to look at that story a little bit later this morning. He then attends Oxford in 1917. He served in World War I. In 1917, he was injured, but that was part of his story. In 1925, he was elected a fellow of Magdalen College at Oxford. So he became on the faculty there, where he served for 29 years. And then he went over to Cambridge for another 9 years, where he had a faculty chair there. In 1931, he becomes a Christian. So in 1929, he says he converted from atheism to theism, and then 2 years later from theism to Christianity. Part of his conversion was long walks with J.R. Tolkien, who wrote the Lord of the Rings. And Lewis and Tolkien and a few others, they were part of an Inklings group, they called it, where they started meeting in 1933 and they met for 16 years. And it's basically like every theologian's dream to have an Inklings club. They could go sit in a pub and be brilliant together. Most of us aren't really brilliant, like those guys were, but it's fun to like think about, oh, I just want to sit in a pub and talk about theology and literature. Those guys did it. So you can see kind of a rundown of his writings from 1940 to 61. That was kind of the height of his popularity and career. He wrote before that and after that. He was also an academic. He has academic writings in his field of English literature and others. And then later on in his life, he gets married. He meets Joy Gresham, who was an American writer in 1952. He is 17 years older than her. They marry in 1956 when she's on her deathbed from cancer. She ends up surviving that for another 4 more years, and she dies in 1960 at the age of 45. In 1961, he writes A Grief Observed, which is his kind of reflections on that heart-wrenching process. And I thought about just assigning that whole book, but I didn't. But I would say it's because to me it's a really just fascinating invitation into our faith is not, our journey. We encounter deep, deep grief. And to have someone like Lewis kind of reflect on that process in his own life, I think is really important for us as Christians to be able to go through. So that's going to be an invitation for you to engage in later on. In 1961, he died at the Kilns, which is his house. It's cool in England they name their houses instead of having addresses. I think that's pretty fun. He died the same day as JFK. So his death announcement kind of got buried a little bit in the headlines, as you can imagine.
And where was the Kilns?
The Kilns was in Oxford. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and he lived there with his brother, and then it's interesting, in the war, he and his friend made a pact that if one of them died, they would take care of their families. And so his friend died, and so he ended up caring for his friend's mother through the rest of her life, and she lived at the Kilns with them and all this. So that's kind of an interesting part of that. Questions about kind of the brief timeline? There's a whole lot to Lewis's life, but we're going to spend most of our time on his writings and not his biography, but I wanted to give you a little context. Cool. All right, so let's dive into the Christian imagination, wonder, and joy as an invitation to faith. Here's our opening question. Where have you experienced longing, wonder, or beauty as a pointer to something beyond yourself? So I'd love you just to kind of think about an experience or an encounter where you've had just this deep sense of longing or wonder or joy. I'll start to share, give you a minute to kind of think what your story might be. I know for me, when I was growing up, one of our favorite things to do as a family, we would go camping down in Southern Oregon by Critter Lake on the Upper Rogue River. I grew up in Beaverton, and we would go down there and we would fish this stretch of the river called the Windy River Canyon. It's pretty remote, and it was a windy river in the canyon. This is beautiful, these big ash cliffs. If you've seen The Princess Bride, we would call them the Cliffs of Insanity, because they're just crazy. And you'd be down there in these big ash cliffs, and you'd have to wade and through the river and go on logs, and we would catch huge strings of fish. But I learned that the reason my dad took us there was not so much for the fish, but was for just the wonder and the beauty. And he would say, this is how I picture heaven. And that has stayed with me, and that's something that I continue, I think, to hold in my own. It's one of these these longings and these experiences of joy that I've had. So I'm curious if others of you have had experiences that kind of point you to something beyond yourself. Yeah.
I've got one. My family took a trip some years ago to the Tetons National Park.
Yeah.
And we went for a walk along to Jenny Lake. I'm sure some of you've been there. And I remember being so overwhelmed by the beauty around me, I had to take my socks and shoes off to feel the earth through my toes. And we get to Jenny Lake, and there's just this small rock out in the middle of this alpine lake fed by the mountain's glacial runoff. And I don't know, I felt like I needed to be out there. So I made my way over through the lake onto the rock, and just kind of laying on my back, looking up and seeing like a 360-degree view of these mountains around me. I just felt like the presence of God in that beautiful place of wonder.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, what else?
I would say the birth of a child. That's was shocking to me. I mean, I just wasn't prepared for just the whole miracle of childbirth and just this little human being.
Yeah. I saw another hand back here. Yeah.
Back in the early 90s, we had our one son who lived in San Clemente up on a hill, and we were taking a walk on a path, and we were coming up the top of the hill, and it was one of those, what is it called, the big moon?
Oh,
and
yeah.
the moon just came up and was literally, if I could touch it, it felt like we could.
Yeah.
And just that feeling, we felt so small because this thing was massive, and the light that came forth just, it was incredible.
That's great, yeah.
After I got baptized in the Holy Spirit in the 80s and 70s, and we moved here, a nun that I was friends with taught me about contemplative prayer.
Okay.
So I got saved basically in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
People go, really? Anyway, she taught me about contemplative prayer, and so I started that as a practice, which is, really trying to handle the monkey mind. But I would experience this incredible, overwhelming sense of the presence and the love and of God and the forgiveness and the fullness. It would just come on me like, I'd say like the fog outside. I mean, it just was, it would be heavy. Yeah. And in those times, at various times, and so thinking of imagination, I would have different, like pictures, I wouldn't say visions maybe, but pictures of kind of where I was on the journey.
Yeah.
So the imagination part has always been not just the black and white words, but the imagination and the experience.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
It's through worship.
Okay.
Yeah.
I grew up in a church that we didn't have a lot of time restrictions on. There were times when we didn't have any restrictions on worship. We just worshipped.
Yeah.
And that presence of the Holy
Sure.
Spirit certainly led you to a wonderful experience.
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
So much smaller, magnificent, beautiful scenery that we're hearing. When I was in high school, I remember being at a crossroads and just dealing with a lot of different things and just really craving God's presence, not feeling God's presence, and just feeling all that pressure that you feel in high school. And I guess I'm an Narnian daughter because just out of nowhere while I'm talking to God, just like completely, upset and lost, and God, I don't see you, I don't feel you. This rabbit, I don't know where it came from, shows up. And again, as an Narnian daughter, I'm like waiting for it to talk to me, but it was already talking to me already. I just so felt God's presence in that moment, and those worries just washed off, and my clarity was better. Like, getting back to basics, like what does God want for me?
Yeah.
So
That's good. That's good. I saw up here, yeah.
Yeah, so I went to a Catholic school, K through 12th grade. Kind of overwhelming, forced upon us, and did a senior trip to Italy, went to the Vatican, and remember going below where all the popes are resting.
Yeah.
And I felt my hands kind of come together. And for the life of me, I couldn't pull them apart until I exited that room. So to me, that was something bigger than me.
Yeah. That's good. I've been down there. That's neat. Wow. Yeah. So this morning we're going to look at three different writings from Lewis that kind of start to get at this idea of wonder and joy as an invitation to faith. And as we get started, just kind of 3 points to help kind of orient us. First of all, Lewis understands that imagination is a God-given faculty. So everyone is part of it's part of what it means to be created in the image of God, is this imagination that we have. And we'll see in Lewis's story through Surprised by Joy, particularly how that book is written. He wrote that near the end of his life as a reflection of his conversion. And he uses joy as this marker of how he would recognize there's something bigger in life. There was this longing for the divine. And for him, his moments, he had encounters with nature that kind of drew him deeper, but for him it was actually the imagination of creating worlds. When he was little, he created a world with his brother called Animal Land, and they would build and create and write stories and do all of these things. And you could see kind of the precursor to Narnia later on. But that was developing, and he recognized just that play and that imagination as part of his calling into faith. But then for him, also just encountering the worlds of imagination through reading and through literature. It makes sense for someone who became a professor of literature to, so much of his story was personally transformed by reading and by encountering fantastical ideas and places and people. But he sees that imagination as a God-given gift. And then for Lewis, imagination works alongside reason to help us perceive truth. So one of the great projects of Lewis's life is he had this conversion from atheism to Christianity, and a lot of his writing, his popular level writings are almost apologetics of reasons why Christianity makes so much sense. And then we put those side by side, his fantasy and his imaginative writings, and those imaginative writings actually work together with his with the reason and the explanations for faith. And so he sees these two things as really important, and both helping to reveal and understand who God is and how God's revealed himself. And then he really explores how longing for joy is what awakens the soul to God. And if we recognize these longings that we have, that everyone has, these are invitations into faith. There's something about this universal sense of longing that awakens us to the reality of who God is. So he starts in Surprised by Joy. And these readings, this is from the reading packet that I gave you. So we're going to hang out here for a bit. But if you haven't done it, like I said, it's no problem. But he talks about, early on, this is from the first chapter, he says, there's an unsatisfied desire which is itself more desirable than any other satisfaction. I call it joy, which here is a technical term and must be sharply distinguished both from happiness and pleasure. In joy, anyone who has experienced it will want it again. It might almost equally be called a particular kind of unhappiness or grief. I just think that's a really interesting explanation of joy. One, he wants to distinguish it between happiness and pleasure. Oftentimes, and he explores this in his writings, he experiences joy and this longing for the divine, something deeper, but so often we get distracted by happiness or pleasure to try and fill that longing for joy. And that's one of the arguments and the topics that he's going to wrestle through. And then he says with joy, once we experience it, we want it again. You know, some of you described these experiences, and there's a sense, if we're honest, we want to get back to that. And so there's a particular kind of grief that we sit with because we're not in that all the time. And we want to try and figure out how to get there. And so I just think that's a really honest kind of assessment of joy, is this longing for something more. At the end of the first chapter, he talks about his mother's death. His mother died when he was a child. And he says, with mother's death, all settled happiness, all that was tranquil and reliable disappeared from my life. There was to be much fun, many pleasures, many stabs of joy, but no more of the old security. It was sea and islands now. The great continent had sunk like Atlantis. That's this is an important part of his story, is the tragedy of his mother's deaths. And yet, as he talks about and he recounts his growing up, these stabs of joy that he had in this book, as you go through it, you'll see he has these just little encounters with joy, and those brief encounters with joy drew him and deepened his longing, even in the midst of having this tragedy that occurs. The second chapter, which I had you read, he calls concentration camp, because he has this childhood, running around building Animal Land and reading all this literature, and then he gets sent off, like a lot of English boys, got sent off to boarding school when he was, I think, 11. And he says, my reading now was mainly rubbish. When the boy passes from nursery literature to school stories, he is going down, not up. And he had this sense of, he was in school and he had to read all this grown-up stuff, and really it was the nursery literature, the imagination, that really is what needs to be cultivated, because it gets at the deeper things of life. So I encourage you, Surprised by Joy, it's a really fascinating, a fun read to hear him in his own voice reflect on his growing up. And then towards the end of the book, when he starts to unpack how these stabs of joy throughout his life led him, in this deeper longing that he had, led him to discovering who God was. And so he has this story where he talks about he's at the train station, and he was always picking up books. He loved to read books, and there was a style of books, and he picked up George MacDonald's Fantasties. And this is what he said about it as he read it that night. He says, "But now I saw the bright shadow coming out of the book into the real world and resting there, transforming all common things and yet itself unchanged. That night my imagination was, in a certain sense, baptized. The rest of me, not unnaturally, took longer. I had not the faintest notion of what I had let myself in for by buying Fantasties." And so he gets this book by George MacDonald, who was a Christian writer. And I was talking to someone in the first class, and they're starting to read Fantasties, and she's like, "It's just weird."
Yes.
Right?
I did.
But it's this fantastical world of fantasy, and yet he says it transformed all common things. Like, this experience of seeing the world through this imagination gave him a new lens to understand something bigger than the reality around him. And for him, this first step of his conversion, it's interesting. He says, "My imagination was baptized." He says, "It took the rest of me a few more years before I got there." But it's interesting, his conversion started with his imagination. And I wonder what you guys think of that idea. I think often in my own experience, I lead with reason, and particularly when I'm thinking about faith and trying to, maybe explain faith to someone who's not a Christian yet. We have all these kind of arguments and these, reasonable things. But for Lewis, his imagination led the way. I don't know. What do you guys think of that?
Just really see God at work.
Yeah.
Just that we know God chases after us. He comes after us before we are even going after him.
Right.
And he knew what it was going to take to get Lewis and to go into his imagination with the stories of myth and all of that, which he loved as a child, and then saw literature as a waste of time, and he goes back to it. I just see the Lord just like, this will help. This is going to be one of the steps.
Yeah.
But I just really see God at work, and I love the imagination. I really do.
Yeah. you were going to go for it. Did you have something?
So much of faith is believing in something that we can't see or touch.
Yeah.
You know, and going back to that childlike belief of Santa Claus, you know, that we believe that imagination. And so for some who don't have that faith, that part of the brain, that imagination is closed. So for him, it makes sense that the imagination is first awakened so that you can now allow God to come in and believe in something you can't see.
Yeah. Do you have something?
Yeah, the thought that came to mind is what I see is that God is a very personal God who's very effective,
Yeah.
who meets us right where we are based on who we are. It's not like he's trying to meet C.S. Lewis on the rational, but he
Sure.
just meets him based on who
Where
he
he
is.
is. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, back here.
I'm just curious what good idea or invention or an idea has come about without creativity.
Yeah.
Like living, and that's how God started us.
Sure.
He created, and I feel like it's just a natural thing to
To
do
invite
that.
into that. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So that brings us to this next book, The Pilgrim's Regress. Now, it's interesting. So Lewis was converted to Christianity in 1931, and in 1933 he writes his first kind of Christian fiction book, The Pilgrim's Regress. Now you guys know, you've heard of The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, that classic kind of allegorical tale, and so this is Lewis's take on it. And it starts out, he says, I dreamed of a boy who was born in the land of Puritania, and his name was John. And I dreamed that when John was able to walk, he ran out of his parents' garden on a fine morning onto the road. And on the other side of the road there was a deep wood, but not thick, full of primroses and soft green moss. When John set eyes on this, he thought he had never seen anything so beautiful. And he ran across the road and into the wood, and was just about to go down on his hands and knees and to pull up the primroses by handfuls, when his mother came running out of the garden gate, and she also ran across the road and caught John up and smacked him soundly and told him he must never go into the wood again. It's like, oh, well, how sad. But here he is, this boy at the beginning. This is how the book starts, this deep, this sense of wonder and joy, and then, no, you can't have that. And it's interesting, as he goes through in this chapter, he has this experience where his mother takes him to the steward. And the steward is going to give him the list of rules that he has to follow as a good boy. And so as we get in, I gave a little background to this quote. The steward here, there's the steward who kind of oversees the county where they are, but then there's the landlord, and the landlord is God, right? And they're trying to do all these things because it's what the landlord demands. And the steward, before he has this conversation, he goes in and he puts a mask on. And John's like thinking, this is interesting. But he sits down and he has this conversation, and the steward, it starts with, I hope, said the steward, that you have not already broken any of the rules. And he's just been given this card of rules. And John's heart began to thump, and his eyes bulged more and more, and he was at his wit's end when the steward took the mask off. And he looked at John with his real face, and he said, better tell a lie, old chap, better tell a lie. Easy as for all concerned, and he popped the mask on his face all in a flash. Right? So you can picture this I hope you haven't broken the rules, and then you better just lie about it. John gulped quickly, and he said, oh, no, sir. Of course not. And then the steward says, that is all just as well, through the mask, because if you did break any of them, and the landlord got to know of it, do you know what he'd do to you? No, sir, said John, and the steward's eyes seemed to be twinkling dreadfully through the holes in the mask. He'd take you and shut you up forever and ever in a black hole full of snakes and scorpions as large as lobsters forever and ever. And besides that, he is such a kind, good man, so very, very kind. I'm sure you'd never want to displease him.
Right? Sounds like religion.
Right, it sounds like
confession.
Yeah, it sounds like, and it's funny, but it's also interesting because it gets at kind of the heart of, especially a little boy who has these encounters with religion that are just like hypocritical and scary, and the kind landlord's going to throw you in a pit of snakes, and so the character is wrestling with this dissonance. And then what happens a few pages later? John is out and he discovers this other wood, and he's looking through a window in the fence, and he says through it he saw a green wood full of primroses. And he remembered suddenly how he had gone into another wood to pull primroses as a child, very long ago. So long that even in the moment of remembering, the memory still seemed out of reach. When he strained to grasp it, there came to him from beyond the wood a sweetness and a pain so piercing that instantly he forgot his father's house, and his mother, and the fear of the landlord, and the burden of the rules. All the furniture of his mind was taken away. A moment later he found that he was sobbing, and the sun had gone in, and what it was that had happened to him he could not quite remember, nor whether it had happened in this wood or in the other wood when he was a child. It seemed to him that a mist which hung at the far end of the wood had parted for a moment, and through the rift he had seen a calm sea, and in the sea an island where the smooth turf sloped down unbroken to the bays, and out of the thickets peeped the pale, small-breasted Oreads, wise like gods, unconscious of themselves like beasts, and tall enchanters, bearded to their feet, sat in green chairs among the forests. But even while he pictured these things, he knew with one part of his mind that they were not the things he had seen, nay, that what had befallen him was not seen at all. I now know what I want, he thought. And so it's this picture, right, of this longing. He has this glimpse of heaven, and this deep sense of now this is what his journey is. And the rest of the story is his trying to get to this place. And he goes through and he encounters all the different modern arguments of the day along the way that are his adversaries. But one of the first things he does is he encounters this deep longing, and then in the next chapter, he pursues that deep longing through he meets a girl, and he gets distracted by her, and he thinks she will fulfill his deep longing, and then he realized that she doesn't. And earlier we looked at this idea where Lewis talked about joy being distinguished from happiness and pleasure. And in his experience, and in Pilgrim's Regress, the happiness and the pleasure distract him from the deeper joy, right? And I think that speaks to in our lives. We see what it is we want. We see the hill, the beauty, the calling of God, and we try and fill it with something that's not of God. And that's part of the story. So now we get to the weight of glory. The weight of glory is written. This was actually a sermon he delivered in 1942. So it's about 9 years after the Pilgrim's Regress. And he's talking about, again, imagination and longing, and that connection to glory that God calls each of us into. So he says, the books are the music in which we thought the beauty was located will betray us if we trusted them. It was not in them, it only came through them, and what came through them was longing. These things, the beauty, the memory of our own past, are good images of what we really desire, but if they are mistaken for the thing itself, they turn into dumb idols, breaking the hearts of their worshipers. For they are not the thing itself, they are only the scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune we have not heard, news from a country we have never yet visited. And to me this is helpful because it helps frame, as we have these encounters, as Lewis had these encounters with beauty, with longing, with joy, the temptation is to make those things ends and of themselves, and to make those things the idols. And he says they're not the thing itself, they're just the scent of a flower we haven't found yet. Those encounters with wonder and beauty and joy, we have to remember that they're pointing us to the ultimate encounter with God that hasn't come yet. News from a country we haven't yet visited, and yet we know that country's there. Like John in the garden, he sees it and he knows that's where he's going after. He goes on and he says, the sense that in this universe we are treated as strangers, the longing to be acknowledged, to meet with some response, to bridge some chasm that yawns between us and reality, is part of our inconsolable secret. we have surely from this point of view the promise of glory in the sense described becomes highly relevant to our deep desire. For glory meant good report with God, acceptance by God, response, acknowledgement, and welcome into the heart of things. The door on which we've been knocking all of our lives will open at last. So for him, this sense of wonder and joy and longing is not only leading us to some beautiful place, heaven, but it's actually the encounter with God. And what's the encounter with God? It's, in biblically, he's describing what glory is in this part of the sermon. And he says glory is when God says, well done, good and faithful servant. That's the deepest longing, is this acceptance by God. The response, the acknowledgement, the welcome. This is the door where we've been knocking all of our lives. And this is what will open, is God invites us in and accepts us for who we are. He says, we want something else which can hardly be put into words, to be united with the beauty we see, to pass into it, to receive it into ourselves, to bathe in it, to become part of it. That is why we have peopled air and earth and water with gods and goddesses and nymphs and elves, that, though we cannot, yet these projections can enjoy in themselves that beauty, grace, and power of which nature is the image. That is why the poets tell us such lovely falsehoods. They talk as if the west wind could really sweep into a human soul, but it can't. They tell us that beauty born of murmuring sound will pass into a human face, but it won't, or not yet. For if we take the imagery of Scripture seriously, if we believe that God will one day give us the morning star and cause us to put on the splendor of the sun, then we may surmise that both the ancient myths and the modern poetry, so false as history, may be very near the truth as prophecy. So this world of fantasy and of myth, no, they're not the reality of history. And yet, he says there's a deeper truth to them because they help us to imagine and to experience this ultimate invitation into glory with God. But then he says, meanwhile, the cross comes before the crown, and tomorrow is a Monday morning. So we have these deep longings, right, for this acceptance and encounter with God, but tomorrow's Monday. A cleft has opened in the pitiless walls of the world, and we are invited to follow our great captain inside. The following him is, of course, the essential point. That being so, it may be asked what practical use there is in the speculations which I have been indulging. He says, I can think of at least one such use. It may be possible for each to think too much of his own potential glory hereafter. It is hardly possible for him to think too often or too deeply about that of his neighbor. The load or weight or burden of my neighbor's glory should be laid daily on my back, a load so heavy that only humility can carry it, and the backs of the proud will not be broken. I love this invitation into not just thinking about our own calling into the ultimate acceptance and glory of God, but what that means for my neighbor. And the weight of glory is the weight of the eternal reality that each of us faces, and that those of us in our community and our neighbors and friends and families, helping to be part of the story of how maybe our neighbors and those around us can encounter God, and recognizing that the longing, the deep longing that everyone experiences is this deep longing for God and for heaven. And that's an invitation that he wants us to have, not just kind of keep to ourselves, but to recognize the implications for those around us as well. So, a few questions to consider. What experiences in your life have awakened a deep sense of joy or wonder? It's important that I think one thing that Lewis does so beautifully in Surprised by Joy is he's taken kind of stock of his story, but he's done it from a lens of looking for how God has kind of stabbed through with these experiences of joy. And I think that's a helpful practice for our own lives. And then how does Lewis describe the relationship between desire, joy, imagination, and faith? To me, it's really helpful and telling to connect the longing of them that we get to explore through imagination with faith. And then finally, why does cultivating a Christian imagination matter for discipleship. So we can take a few minutes and we can talk about these questions. If you have other observations or questions that you have, I'd love to hear that as well. So what thoughts do you guys have on all this idea, these ideas? Or what questions do you have? Just makes sense.
Well, I know one thing I do when I meet someone or think about someone who I define as a difficult person. I'm kind of thinking, it's good in those situations, it's very awkward or whatever. And that is that I use my imagination to turn them into a 3-year-old version of themselves. And I don't mean in terms of being weak, but being innocent.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Encountering them as a 3-year-old is much more like that's how do you think that person started?
Yeah.
You know, and even down to people on the street. You know, I look at people, some of the homeless, and I try to look at what that person looked like as a 3-year-old girl or a 3-year-old boy. So.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. What other thoughts or questions? Yeah.
Lewis really helped me because I've had these experiences of what Lewis calls joy, and they shaped me so much, and they were so powerful to me, and I wanted them so bad.
Yeah.
I had this tendency to try to like grab them and hold on to them and figure out how I might control them and not lose them.
Right.
And then, but inevitably, I couldn't do that. They were gone.
Yeah.
And I loved how Lewis, when Lewis just, pointed me to, it's like, these are meant to come, be there, be a pointer to you, to God, and then be gone.
And then they go away.
And it hurts that they go, but they're meant to be this.
Right.
And they're meant to point you to God and move on.
Yeah.
And that has really helped me because it's helped me to go, okay, I tasted that moment of joy, and that was such a sweet, powerful thing, and it really pointed me toward God. But now, what is it that, what am I supposed to be doing now that I've experienced that? Where am I supposed to be going with that? What was that meant to be pointing me towards? So that was really helpful.
Yeah, that's good. I remember you guys have seen, I imagine most of you have seen the Lord of the Rings movies, and the books as well, but the very end where, they're back and Frodo's getting ready to go on the boat and it's all beautiful, and to me that's like the saddest part. And I think it's sad when it's over, and if you were, just the experience of the years of those movies coming out and the event of going to see them, and it was all over. But the story and the longing, here, Frodo and Gandalf, they're going to this distant, country, this distant land, and yet there's a grief and a sadness, and it's just wanting to hold on to the mystery, the joy, the adventure, but recognizing that that's a pointer to something bigger. I want to give you. I'll let you share. Did you have something? No, rubbing your eyes. 2 invitations this week as we wrap up this morning. First of all, I want to invite you, both this week and as we go through, to exercise your imagination. Maybe do something different you haven't done in a while or had time to do. Read something, watch or observe something fantastical. I give you permission to pick up a fantasy book, or watch Lord of the Rings again this week or something, or just allow yourself to enter into this kind of fantasy world for a bit. But as you do so, pay attention to the longings and joys and desires within the story, and both within your own life. What do these things kind of ignite in you, both for the characters and in your own self as you're watching it? I think those kind of exercises in imagination just help us to kind of tap into this bigger story of longing and desire. And then I want to invite you into a spiritual practice. So the next 4 weeks, I'm going to introduce a different spiritual practice that's connected to imagination. And this first one is Lectio Divina, sacred reading. And basically, it's a slow and prayerful reading of Scripture. And so it's got 4 steps. First of all, read a short passage slowly and more than once. If you're not sure where to start, you can pick anything, but maybe you want to choose something from the Gospel of John, for example, was the sermon series we're in now until Easter. And you could pick a passage from there, read it slowly a few times, and then reflect on a word or a phrase that you notice. Allow something to kind of stand out to you, and then allow your imagination not to distract you, but actually to pull you in and to kind of focus on what it is that you're noticing. And then pray about what you're noticing. This may be gratitude or questions or emotions or resistance. And then just rest in the silence of God's presence for a few moments. So a simple invitation in the Lectio Divina this week. I have further, on this link, I have a learning resources, one of the PDFs in there, and it has kind of a fuller explanation of Lectio Divina, if you want that. Don't make it too complicated on yourself, it's okay. When you get distracted, I won't say if, when you get distracted, just pay attention to what God's doing. But with that, let me say a prayer for us as we get ready to go. Dear God, thank you so much for just this morning and the time and the opportunity we have to explore C.S. Lewis and imagination. And I pray this week that you will give us opportunities to just slow down a little bit and notice the deep stabs of joy and longing that we have for you. And help us to use those as ways to encounter your grace and your presence and your love. I just pray that you will continue to be with us as we seek you and as we grow in community together. In Jesus' name, amen. I'll hang out if you have more questions, but thank you, and we'll see you guys next time. I gotta get to this. Glad you came by. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me.